All right, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well as we continue to head towards conference championship weekend. We are almost there. Going to be fun, but let's have some conversations about some things we got to get into before we get there. Like, for instance, what is going on across the league when it comes to new head coaches. And this is very relevant to the Seahawks. Obviously, the Seahawks are not looking for a new head coach this offseason, but a lot of teams are, and the Seahawks have some guys that have already drawn attention. We all know about Kubiak. Aiden Dirty is also potentially on the market. That one seems a little bit less likely, but we all know that Kubiak is sought after. And I think that now that we know what the openings are and we know what some of the fillings are, we should revisit the Kubiak conversation as it pertains to him maybe getting a head coaching job. All right, guys, before we go any further into this video, let's take a minute so I can tell you about my friends over at Sleeper. If you're not using Sleeper this year for daily fantasy, then you are missing out. Download the app and get ready to have more fun with sports this year. Make all kinds of picks on over-unders. Get on over there. Football, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever your sports fancy is. I've got some picks going for this week, the conference championship games. I got the over on Cooper Kupp, 30.5 receiving yards. I got Ken Walker scoring an anytime touchdown. I got Mevis over on the Rams kicking at least 2 field goals. And I got Drake May with the under on 227 passing yards. So get on over to Sleeper. Use promo code SBN, that is SBN, to get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100 and go have more fun with sports this year. All right, so let's take a look at where things stand right now when it comes to coaches around the league. There were 10 openings this offseason. There were 10 different head coaching openings this offseason. There was a little bit of staggering, obviously, because some teams were in the playoffs. Some teams even won a playoff game and then let their coach go, or the coach left, or whatever. So it was staggered a little bit, but we have ultimately had 10 openings. And right now, half of those openings have been filled. So you've got the Ravens with Jesse Minter. That was yesterday. Giants, John Harbaugh, although I heard the contract isn't signed yet, but it's going to happen. Falcons, Kevin Stefanski. Dolphins, Jeff Hafley. And the Titans with Robert Saleh. Now, again, we're peeling this back to the point where we're talking about Kubiak, right? So who did Kubiak interview with during Seattle's bye week? Because remember, he wasn't able to do interviews the week after or this week because he's busy. So if you go to this tweet from Brady Henderson, and this one's a few days old, but it doesn't matter because he hasn't been able to interview over the last several days. He interviewed for 6 different teams: the Giants, the Falcons, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Raiders, and the Ravens. So of those 6 teams, 4 teams have located their new head coach. The only teams left that do not have a head coach that interviewed Kubiak during the Seattle bye week is Arizona and Las Vegas. Those 2 teams right there. That's it. The Bills, Steelers, and Browns did not interview Kubiak. The Browns kind of seem like an untouchable location at the moment. Seems like nobody really wants to go there. Even guys that are not as desirable as Kubiak seem to be steering kind of clear of Cleveland. So that just feels like a very toxic situation. Now, the Bills are interesting, right? Because they didn't fire their coach until after the divisional round. So they haven't had the opportunity to even consider hiring Kubiak, or excuse me, interviewing with him. Now, what happens after this Sunday? Would the Bills maybe have Kubiak in? Now, the word is the Bills are going to hire Brian Daboll because Josh Allen likes him so much, but who knows if that's the way things are going to go? Who knows? So here's the thing. Here's what I'm looking at right now. I have said many times during this offseason that it is overwhelmingly likely that Klint Kubiak gets hired as a head coach this cycle because of all the openings. And you can see there were a lot of openings. And because Kubiak had had such a great year in Seattle, turning around that offense going from, I think, 18th in points scored last year or 17th to 3rd this year. And remember, he did it on a team that was very cheap offensively, one of the cheapest, I think actually the cheapest offense in football, and getting such good results out of that group. I mean, I think he deserves an opportunity to be a head coach. But you take a look at this and you start doing the math in your head, and it's like, okay, the Bills, they seem like they're going to go get Brian Daboll. Steelers, I've heard a lot about Mike McCarthy, maybe Brian Flores. I don't think Kubiak is a Steelers kind of head coach. I think they want a defensive guy. I think they want somebody who is a little bit more, if he's not a defensive guy, then at least somebody with a lot of experience so they can maintain a high floor like a McCarthy. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a Steelers guy to me. And of course, they didn't interview him when they could have. They had a week to do it and they chose not to. Same with Cleveland, by the way. So I don't think that's going to happen. So this is the benefit of making it deep in the postseason. When you make it deep in the postseason, your coordinators and assistants can't get hired until you're eliminated or the season is over. So therefore, you take a look at this and it's like, yeah, if Kubiak was available to hire right after the season ended, he probably would have been. If he had been available after the wild card round, he probably would have been hired by somebody. But these teams don't want to wait. These teams want to jump on somebody they like while they're available. If you're Atlanta, I'm sure you liked Kubiak. I'm sure Kubiak was appealing to you, but you can't wait for a month for Kubiak to shake free when you can go get Stefanski, who I think is a really, really good coach. You got to take that opportunity. So if you look at how this is shaking out, it sure seems like the only two teams that are going to go after Kubiak potentially are the Cardinals and the Raiders. So there isn't a lot else out there that is all that great. Like I imagine maybe one of these teams goes after McDermott because McDermott was good in Buffalo. It was time for him to go, but he was good in Buffalo. Very good coach. And I imagine a team like the Raiders or the Cardinals would love to have somebody with a solid floor like that. But here's the thing, because we know for a fact that the Raiders are pretty much for a fact, it's highly rumored the Raiders like Kubiak, and they are going to pursue Kubiak and Davis Webb, the quarterback coach in Denver. And those are probably going to be the two guys that they really covet at head coach. So let's start with that Raiders thing, because to me, they are the most likely team at this point to get Kubiak. You have very few blue chippers, right? You've got Gentil. And by the way, somebody in the comments the other day said I was mispronouncing his name, Gentil's name. How else are you supposed to pronounce it? Like, to my knowledge, that is literally how everybody pronounces it, but whatever. You guys know who I'm talking about. You've got Brock Bowers, and that's kind of it. You've got really nothing on defense to get all that excited about, except for Crosby, who is probably going to get traded this offseason. And you've got JPJ, who the team doesn't seem all that hot to trot on. They don't really have anything else to get excited about right now. They have cap space and they have the number 1 overall pick. But I think everybody kind of knows, I think everybody kind of expects they're going to spend that number 1 overall pick on Mendoza, the quarterback from Indiana. And okay, Mendoza is an RPO guy. Kubiak is not an RPO guy. So how does that work? That's my hang up here. Mendoza does not fit that Kubiak offense at all, really, and he may never. I think Mendoza needs to go to a system like Brian Daboll's system, something like that, where you're just running a lot of RPOs and you're constantly facing the line of scrimmage and you're not playing under center. He didn't really play under center that much at Indiana, and I don't think that is a Kubiak quarterback. Kubiak's system, it's the Shanahan system. It needs quarterbacks that can play a little bit more traditionally, and Mendoza is not really that guy. So unless the Raiders can be talked out of drafting a guy like Mendoza and maybe going a different way, which I think is very unlikely, they do need a quarterback, and Mendoza is the only game in town. I don't see that as being a good landing spot for Kubiak. I like Spytech. I think Spytech might be a good GM, but they also have a terrible ownership situation. And I I look at that, and I don't know if Kubiak would be able to say no if they offered him the job, but I don't see that working. So I do wonder if Kubiak would be able to look a few steps ahead and realize this is not going to work out well for me. Mendoza is not the kind of quarterback that I need to be coaching. It's going to take years, if ever, for me to get him to play the right way. And Arizona might be the least appealing job in football other than the Cleveland job. You're in the toughest division in football. You've got no quarterback, and you've got no real way to get a quarterback this offseason. You've got a couple of blue chippers like McBride and maybe Marvin Harrison. Depends on how you feel about him right now. Maybe Walter Nolan's kind of a blue chipper, but I don't think so. There's not a lot going on defensively. Buda Baker's getting older. Maybe Trey Benson's good, but he's been in the league a couple years now. I haven't noticed that much from him. So it depends on how you feel about a guy like a Paris Johnson Jr., who is good, but those are two places that it's hard to imagine a guy like Kubiak having success. And clearly we've seen that teams have kind of a quick trigger right now with coaches. I don't think Kubiak's getting 4 or 5 years to get things right. He's got 2 or 3. So for the first time, really since I would say mid-season, I've got a pretty good sense that Kubiak is going to come back to Seattle next year. I think the only obstacle really is the Raiders. I think that the Raiders are the only team in play here. And I'll say it again, if Kubiak can read the writing on the wall, that's not a good place for him at all. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. I kind of feel like we might get Kubiak back at this point, guys. It's feeling that way, and I like it. All right, see ya.